I set out to build the cheapest iPhone I could using parts from only AliExpress. Could I assemble a phone by each individual part and make it cheaper than buying one on the used market? I set out to find the parts I needed to build an iPhone 12. Being a few years old, I thought its parts would be fairly affordable, making it ideal for this experiment. The component I need first is a housing. This is where I need to pick between a mini, standard or pro model, as well as a color choice. I had to calculate the price difference between buying the small parts separately to install in the cheaper housing or just buying a housing with those parts already installed. It turned out to be a few dollars cheaper to get the housing with the parts. A logic board was next. Obviously a dead or locked one is no use, but a working one has the option of face or no face, by which I assume they mean Face ID. I'm not going to build a faulty phone, so face it is. It took quite a bit of time to find the cheapest options, as sorting by the lowest price doesn't work on sites like AliExpress and eBay, because sellers typically add an unrelated option to the listing that's significantly cheaper than the actual item you searched for, but it makes it appear in the top results when you search by lowest price. Other times, the item is of a good price, but the shipping has been inflated to make up for the discounted price. But I tried my best to get the cheapest of each item, and then I placed my order. The first parcel we have here is the housing. I opted for an iPhone 12 mini as I've wondered just how small the minis really are, having owned both the regular sized and pro models. Overall, the housing looks good, but it's clear to me that it's not an original. It's missing the gold-plated contacts for Face ID, the microphone bracket is crooked, and the wireless charging coil isn't quite stuck down properly. It's by no means a bad part, just some minor things of note. And maybe it's just me, but that product red text appears to be slightly crooked. They also didn't take too kindly to the Apple logo on some of the parts. The next parcel contained the motherboard and associated components. This one was packed really well. If it wasn't for all the warranty stickers and writing, I'd think I was unpacking something that was new. The logic board looks to be in good condition and includes its paired earpiece cable and front camera array for Face ID functionality. To put this phone together, we'll of course need some screws and brackets. I ordered one packet but received two. We won't need all of them as some parts have already been installed, but there's still plenty we'll need. Unlike many Android phones that usually have one, maybe two lengths of screws, the iPhone would have about 10 at least. Some only a millimeter bigger than another, but install a screw too long into a motherboard and you risk damaging it. Some of the common screws can be identified and sorted by eye, but most will have to be measured by a caliper. Standoff, tri-wing, small and long Phillips, as well as housing screws are the main categories. I can begin by installing the logic board, which requires the Taptic engine to be temporarily removed. The logic board is held down with 3 standoff screws, and of course not all standoff screws found inside the iPhone 12 are the same size. So it took some trial and error to get the correct ones that would fasten. For all the other screws in the iPhone, their lengths have been included on the respective iFixit repair guide. All it takes is a lot of measuring of random screws to find the length you need. I decided to find all the screws I would need to complete this build and pair it with the matching bracket or component to make the assembly easier. A 1.2mm tri-wing screw for the display and battery bracket, 1mm tri-wing, 5 of those and we'll have an upper bracket, a 1.6mm Phillips screw for the camera bracket, and so on. I'll get the Taptic engine promptly attached with its accompanying bracket before installing the Face ID array. For the rear cameras, I've purchased this one that claims to be an original, unrepaired unit, so in theory it should pair with Apple's new parts pairing tool. The camera lenses are covered by a protective film, which is supposed to stop dust from collecting in there before the cameras are installed. However, removing the film is difficult and can leave a residue. I've always found that once fingerprints get on a metal part inside the iPhone, it will never fully come off. I don't know whether it's coated in something as some kind of tamper-proof system, or it just happens to be the material it's made from. Our new display is an OLED for iPhone 10, 10R, 10s Max, LCD in-cell for iPhone 11, 12, 13 Pro, Max, 13 Mini, 14 Plus, 15 OLED LCD display screen digitizer assembly. AAA, Triple Plus quality for only $33. Attaching to it is the earpiece cable that came with the logic board. It appears to have been repaired. Obvious flux can be seen around the solder joints. I'll remove the protective film covering the sensors and get it attached to the back of the screen. With that, the display can be plugged onto the iPhone 12 mini. For the battery, the one I ordered from AliExpress never arrived. The tracking seemed to be a dud, so I don't think they ever shipped it. So I'll use a battery I sourced from my usual supplier. It cost me only $12. It shouldn't be any surprise that the mini iPhone has a mini battery, but it really is at 8.57 watt hours. Installing it into the iPhone 12 mini, it's time for a test boot. Thankfully it boots, but is in Chinese, so I'll need to change the language to English. But we can now see this phone is indeed an iPhone 12 mini 64GB, and from the model number ending in RU/A, we know she's a Russian model. In the parts and service menu, we're getting a prompt to pair our new parts, but it couldn't be that easy. We need an internet connection so the phone can phone home to get Apple's approval. Now it's saying the phone software is too outdated. iOS 18.1 is not good enough. I need to be on the latest 18.2. But just by connecting it to the internet, it now says the battery and camera are ineligible for pairing. I could then proceed to waste 2 hours trying to get the phone to request the update before starting the download with an estimated time of 7 to 10 hours. I gave up and used iTunes to get it updated in just a matter of a few minutes. And after all that effort, Apple has now taken away the capability of pairing any of the parts I've installed in this phone. But did you see that? The brightness all of a sudden was capped at a lower brightness. The screen now just doesn't get as bright as it did just a second ago. So I'll do what any professional does and turn it off and on again. And the brightness is back, but the phone isn't responding to touch. Oh. There it goes. And there goes that screen brightness again. Missed it? Have a look at the brightness slider. In the 0 to 50% range, the brightness changes. 51 to 100% does absolutely nothing. One of my iPhone 16s did this as part of my teardown. Is the screen drawing too much power so it's limiting its output? Or is this a feature to limit the functionality of a third-party screen? It wasn't doing this before I updated, and Apple deemed it was ineligible for pairing. It was at this point that I noticed a residue in the camera lens that had been left behind by those protective films we removed earlier. So it's out with the cameras and time to equip a sponger with a microfiber cloth to clean each lens before the cameras are reinstalled. Now the display can be reattached and the 2 brackets enclosing its connectors can be fastened into place. I've left the stickers on the motherboard as if I have any issues with these parts and attempt to return them, they usually want to see their sticker. It's not particularly a nice looking thing to leave on the inside, but if you are doing this yourself, it is what you'd likely have to do. Now it has come time to remove the remainder of the plastic film, covering the front camera, back of the display, and adhesive. Then the display can be closed and pressed down into place, with the 2 pentalobe case screws being installed at the base of the phone. But it's not a job well done until we've tested it with iTest, a device hardware testing software I built myself. Using this app, I can easily test a wide array of hardware functionality, including but not limited to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, the charge port, speaker and microphone, vibration, touch, burn-in, cameras, light and proximity sensors, gyroscope, and biometrics. For the color and burn-in test, you can see a small discoloration towards the bottom of the screen, which can be hard to see without a solid white background. Under iOS 18, the light sensor is now allowed to function on a replacement display, so the test passes, something that in the past would have failed. But it's not all flying colours, as Face ID cannot scan my face. With that exception, this phone is working well, and the app has compiled a list of our results, which we can share if needed. If you'd like to test your phone, download iTest, available for both iOS and Android. Now all that's left to do is remove the sticker and plastic protective film from our new display. And we're done. So this is it, an iPhone 12 mini built from parts purchased from AliExpress. The phone has come up great. The overall fit and finish looks just as good as a factory unit. The only discernible difference is the display. For $30 you can't expect the world. After all, it's only an LCD and not an OLED, despite what the listing title stated. Only in the fine print would you know that it's actually a cheaper in-cell version, which is actually just a fancy name for LCD. The chin is larger and the quality is not as good as the original screen, but for the price it's actually pretty good and the touch is responsive too. It's ever so slightly thicker, but considering they made an LCD work on a phone designed for an OLED, I'm surprised they got it so thin. It feels like the phone has only a screen protector on. It's a shame Apple wouldn't let us pair anything, but it doesn't really surprise me. At least they now display the battery capacity and enable True Tone, despite the display and battery not being paired. As for cost, I paid $353 Australian dollars, which is around 220 US, which is more than what you'd pay to buy one used on eBay. The truth is, sellers buying phones to part out sell the individual parts for a total worth more than the phone. So if you're repairing your phone, it can be financially viable. But buying a phone part by part doesn't make financial sense, especially considering you have to assemble it, with non-genuine parts which may not be as you expected. I did attach an original OLED refurb display to this phone. This is the sort of screen I'd usually use in a restoration or repair. It costs 150 Australian dollars, which would bring the total to $500, to get this phone equipped with the best quality screen. You can see the difference straight away in the bezel sizes, although the notch still clips the network signal icon, but that might just be an iOS thing. But not even this original screen will pair under Apple's strict parts pairing tool. This is because the sensor cable must match the display and not the phone, the complete opposite of what it used to be. The screen also doesn't respond to touch immediately after booting up, so again, this is most likely an iOS problem and nothing to do with the screen. One thing that isn't working right though is Face ID. It's temperamental to say the least. It can detect my face, but it can't seem to scan it. I did get it to register my face once, but the device refuses to unlock using it, asking for a passcode every time. In the end, this is not something I'd recommend, as even the cheapest parts total more than the phone is worth used. While I've given criticism to AliExpress in the past for its large array of junk and wasteful products, you can actually find some good items on it, but it's not as cheap as it first seemed. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the phone restoration playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.